It was a Tuesday morning, the kind where the sun streamed in just perfectly, turning my kitchen into a golden haven. I was humming along to the radio, making coffee, and thinking about the upcoming weekend. Then the pregnancy test came back positive, and just like that, my whole world tilted on its axis. I should have known that Chad wasn't the man I thought he was. I'll never forget what happened next. Hi, I'm Melissa, and I want to share my story with you. It's a story of heartbreak, resilience, and ultimately, finding true love and happiness. Before I begin, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and tell me where in the world you are. Chad and I had been married for 3 years. We had a good life, or so I thought. We had a nice little house in the suburbs, 2 cars, and a dog named Buster. We went on vacations, had dinner with friends, and generally enjoyed each other's company. At least, that's what I thought. So, when I found out I was pregnant, I was overjoyed. I couldn't wait to tell Chad. I planned a special dinner. I made his favorite meal, lasagna, and set the table with candles and flowers. When he walked in the door, I could barely contain my excitement. "I have some wonderful news," I said, beaming. Chad looked tired, preoccupied. "What is it?" he asked, tossing his briefcase on the floor. "I'm pregnant," I announced, expecting him to share my joy. His face didn't light up. Instead, his brow furrowed, and he ran a hand through his hair. "Pregnant?" he repeated, his voice flat. "Yes, we're going to have a baby," I said, my smile starting to waver. He paced the room, avoiding my gaze. "Melissa, this is complicated." "Complicated? What do you mean complicated?"
"It's a baby, Chad. Our baby." He finally stopped pacing and looked at me, his eyes filled with a strange mixture of fear and guilt. "I can't do this," he said quietly. "Can't do what? Be a father? Be a husband?" I asked, my voice trembling. "All of it," he said. "I'm not ready. I never wanted this." My heart shattered into a million pieces. "What are you saying?" I whispered, tears welling up in my eyes. "I'm leaving, Melissa," he said, his voice barely audible. "I'm leaving you." He walked out that night, leaving me standing there, alone and pregnant, in the middle of our perfectly set dinner table. It felt like a cruel joke. I didn't realize how much worse it would get. The next few days were a blur. I called my best friend Julie, who rushed over and held me while I cried. She was a rock, offering support and practical advice when I couldn't even think straight.
"You're going to be okay, Melissa," she said, squeezing my hand. "You're strong, and you're going to get through this." Chad moved out quickly, taking most of his belongings. He didn't call, didn't text, didn't even acknowledge that I existed. It was as if I had been erased from his life. Then came the phone call from Chad's mother, Eleanor. I had always tried to maintain a good relationship with his parents, but I knew Eleanor had always favored Chad. "Melissa," she began, her voice cold and devoid of any sympathy. "Chad has told us about the situation. We understand his decision." "Understand?" I asked, incredulous. "He's abandoning his pregnant wife. How can you possibly understand that? He's young, Melissa. He needs to live his life," she said dismissively. "And frankly, we always thought he could do better than you." The words stung like a slap in the face. "How could you say that?" I managed to choke out. "We're just being honest. Don't expect any help from us. Chad needs our support right now, and that's where our loyalty lies." She hung up before I could even respond. I was completely alone. My husband had left me, and his parents had disowned me. I felt like I was drowning, but then I felt a tiny flutter in my belly, a reminder that I wasn't entirely alone. I had a baby to think about now, a life to protect. The next few months were incredibly difficult. I struggled with morning sickness, exhaustion, and the crushing weight of loneliness. I had to sell the house because I couldn't afford the mortgage on my own. I moved into a small apartment closer to Julie. Julie was my lifeline. She went with me to doctor's appointments, helped me set up the nursery, and listened patiently to my endless anxieties and fears. Without her, I don't know how I would have survived. Work was a struggle. I was constantly tired and distracted, and my performance suffered. My boss, Sarah, was understanding at first, but eventually, she had to let me go. Losing my job was devastating, but I knew I had to focus on the baby. I applied for every assistance program I could find: WIC, food stamps, unemployment, anything to make ends meet. It was humiliating, but I had no choice. Finally, the day arrived. After 20 long hours of labor, I gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. I named him Tiago. Holding him in my arms for the first time was the most incredible feeling I had ever experienced. All the pain, all the struggles seemed to fade away in that moment. He was perfect. He was mine. The first few months of Tiago's life were a whirlwind of sleepless nights, endless feedings, and mountains of diapers. I was exhausted, but I was also filled with an overwhelming sense of love and purpose. Tiago was my everything. I knew I had to find a way to provide for him. I started doing freelance writing from home, working whenever Tiago was asleep. It wasn't much, but it was enough to pay the bills and put food on the table. As Tiago grew older, he became my constant companion. We went to the park, read books, and played games. He was a happy, curious, and loving child. I made sure he knew he was loved unconditionally. Even though he didn't have a father figure in his life, Chad remained absent. Their fire, as it been never called, never sent a card, never even asked about Tiago. It was as if Tiago didn't exist to him. I tried not to dwell on it, but it hurt. Tiago deserved a father, and Chad was missing out on the best thing in the world. When Tiago was about 3 years old, Chad's parents suddenly reappeared. Eleanor called and asked if they could see Tiago. I was hesitant, but I decided that Tiago deserved to know his grandparents, even if they hadn't been there for me. The first visit was awkward. Eleanor and George, Chad's father, arrived with a mountain of expensive toys and clothes. They showered Tiago with attention, but their questions felt intrusive and judgmental. "Does he have a father figure in his life?" Eleanor asked, her eyes narrowed. "He has me," I replied, my voice tight. "And he has Julie and other supportive friends and family." "That's not the same," George said, shaking his head. "He needs a man in his life." I bit my tongue to keep from saying something I would regret. They continued to visit Tiago every few weeks, bringing gifts and offering unsolicited advice.
I tried to be polite, but their presence was a constant reminder of Chad's abandonment and their own lack of support. One day, Eleanor said something that crossed the line. "You know, Melissa, if Chad hadn't left you, Tiago would have had a much better life," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "He would have had a father, a big house, and all the advantages." I snapped. "Get out," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "Get out of my house, and don't ever come back. You have no idea what kind of life Tiago has. He is loved, he is happy, and he is thriving, despite your son's absence and your constant judgment." They left without a word, and I slammed the door behind them. I was done with them. Tiago didn't need their toxic presence in his life. As Tiago grew older, I started to think about dating again. It was scary, putting myself out there after what had happened with Chad.
But I knew I deserved to be happy, and I wanted Tiago to see that it was possible to find love again. I went on a few awkward dates, but nothing felt right. Then I met Douglas. He was a widower with 2 children of his own, Sarah and Michael. We met at a school event, and we struck up a conversation about our kids. There was an instant connection. Douglas was kind, compassionate, and supportive. He understood what it was like to be a single parent, and he never judged me for my past. He loved Tiago as if he were his own son, and Tiago adored him. Our families blended seamlessly. Sarah and Michael welcomed Tiago with open arms, and we became a close-knit, loving family. Douglas was everything Chad wasn't: present, supportive, and loving. Years passed. Tiago grew into a bright, intelligent, and compassionate young man. He excelled in school, made friends easily, and had a passion for art. I was so proud of him. Douglas and I got married in a small ceremony surrounded by our children and close friends. It was the happiest day of my life. I finally felt like I had found my forever family. Then, one day, out of the blue, Chad reappeared. Tiago was 16 years old. I received a call from an unfamiliar number. I hesitated, then answered. "Melissa?" A voice said on the other end. It was Chad. My heart pounded in my chest. "Chad?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Yes, it's me," he said. "I know it's been a long time." "What do you want?" I asked, my voice cold. "I want to see Tiago," he said. "I want to be a part of his life." I was stunned. After 16 years of absence, he suddenly wanted to be a father? "Why now, Chad?" I asked, my voice shaking with anger. "Why, after all this time?" "I'm sober now, Melissa," he said. "I've been in recovery for a few years, and I've realized what a mistake I made. I want to make amends. I want to be a father to Tiago." I didn't know what to say. I told him I needed time to think about it. I hung up and sat there trembling. I told Douglas about the phone call. He listened patiently, then took my hand. "It's your decision, Melissa," he said. "I'll support you no matter what you decide. But think about what's best for Tiago." I talked to Julie, who was as skeptical as I was. "Don't let him waltz back into your life after all this time," she warned. "He doesn't deserve it." I knew she was right, but I also knew that Tiago deserved to make his own decision about his father. I decided to talk to Tiago about it. "Tiago," I said, sitting him down in the living room. "Your father called me." His eyes widened.
My father? You mean Chad? Yes, I said. He wants to see you. He wants to be a part of your life. Tiago was silent for a moment, processing the information. "What do you think?" he asked finally. "It's up to you, Tiago," I said. "I want you to make your own decision. I'll support you either way." Tiago thought about it for a few days, then told me he wanted to meet Chad. I arranged a meeting at a neutral location, a coffee shop near our house. I was nervous as I drove Tiago to the coffee shop. I didn't know what to expect. When we arrived, Chad was already there, waiting. He looked different. He was older, of course, and he looked tired, but he also looked sincere. "Tiago," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "It's so good to finally meet you." Tiago nodded, his expression guarded. They sat down and talked for hours.
I sat at a nearby table, watching them, trying to stay out of their conversation. After the meeting, Tiago was quiet. I didn't push him to talk about it. A few days later, he came to me. "Mom," he said, "I want to get to know him, but I don't want him to replace Douglas. Douglas is my dad. He's always been there for me." I hugged him tightly. "I understand, Tiago," I said. "Douglas will always be your dad. Chad is just your biological father." Chad started spending time with Tiago. They went to baseball games, movies, and concerts. Tiago seemed to enjoy their time together, but he never let Chad get too close. One evening, Chad came to my house. I was surprised to see him. Douglas was out of town on a business trip. "Melissa," he said, his voice hesitant, "can we talk?" We sat down on the porch. "What is it, Chad?" I asked. "I wanted to apologize," he said, "for everything. For leaving you, for not being there for Tiago, for being a terrible husband and father." "I appreciate that, Chad," I said. "But it doesn't change the past." "I know," he said. "But I also wanted to tell you something else." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a familiar longing. "I still love you, Melissa." I never stopped loving you. My heart skipped a beat. After all these years, he still loved me. Chad, I said softly, you can't. I know it's been a long time, he said, but I think we could be happy together. For Thiago's sake, if nothing else. I shook my head. No, Chad, I said firmly. I'm happy. I'm married to Douglas, and we have a wonderful life. I can't go back to you. We can't be together. But Tiago needs a father, he pleaded. We could be a family again. Tiago has a father, Chad, I said.
He has Douglas. And you can be a part of his life as his biological father, but that's it. I won't jeopardize my happiness or Tiago's for some fantasy of a perfect family. He looked defeated. I understand, he said quietly. I just wanted to try. I know, I said, and I appreciate that. But it's time for you to move on, Chad, just like I did. Before leaving, Chad confessed one more thing. He had asked his parents to not be too involved in Tiago's life. He said he was ashamed, and it hurt him to see his son, so he wanted his parents to keep him away. I was even more disgusted by his actions. I stood up and walked into the door. Goodbye, Chad, I said. I hope you find happiness. I closed the door behind him and leaned against it, taking a deep breath. It was over. Chad was finally out of my life for good. I went inside and hugged Tiago. Everything okay, Mum? He asked.
Everything's perfect, Tiago, I said, smiling. I have everything I need right here. I looked around at my family. Douglas, Sarah, Michael, and Tiago. They were my world. They were my happiness, and I wouldn't trade them for anything. I realized that Chad's abandonment, while painful, had led me to where I was today. It had made me stronger, more resilient, and more appreciative of the love and support I had in my life. I had built a beautiful life for myself and Tiago, a life filled with love, laughter, and happiness. And that was all that mattered. Some people break families, but some people come along and complete them. And I was lucky enough to have the second kind. And that's my story. A story of heartbreak, resilience, and finding true love. I hope it inspires you to never give up on your dreams, no matter how difficult life may seem. And if you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to my channel for more stories like this.